I had a teacher in primary school named Ms. Leanne Patterson at Forest Primary School, and she was really instrumental in me getting into writing. I mean, my parents encouraged me, but I often leave this out of the story, and I shouldn't. When I was in about year 4 or 5, we had to do these creative writing exercises, and I wrote these really gory horror stories, basically about people being impaled and their eyes on spikes and things like that. And I'm not sure whether she saw some sort of spark of talent in me, despite the fact that I wrote about these things, but she really encouraged me and started to, nurture my writing, and she would give me different poets, quite advanced poets, sort of Gerard Manley Hopkins and things like this, even in year 5, little excerpts, even some T.S. Eliot, like little, excerpts from his work. And it started to expand my mind about writing, and I would start to write on all these different topics. I think that darkness and kind of the horror is still present in my work in little ways, maybe a little bit more subtle, well, hopefully a lot more subtle than when I was 9 years old. But that's how it really started, and she was a huge influence on me. And then in high school I had a teacher called John Mazer, who was a eccentric Canadian guy, and he really expanded my mind as well. So those two I remember, Leanne Patterson and John Mazer. Yeah, definitely. I see poetry as therapy for myself and hopefully for others. I have to say that I've got more of an inclination towards the darkness. I respond more to my feelings of anger or frustration or depression. But I always try and sprinkle a little bit of redemption into my poetry. I'm trying to write more poetry that has a positive bent to it, but I try to use both. It has to have darkness in it and it has to have light in it, otherwise there's no point, I think, sometimes. And it gives it subtlety, it gives it nuance, it gives it depth. But yeah, I guess I try to respond to any sort of tide of emotion that I have, really. And I wouldn't be living, I don't think, if I didn't have poetry or music as a means to express myself. And I feel a lot of people are that way as well. I do hope to have an impact on the way people see Australia, see what's going on politically and socially in this country. I don't think, I have to be realistic about this. I'm just a poet, I don't have a huge audience, but so long as I can make a few, people think about what's going on here, that's what's important, and just express myself. I'm hopefully not doing it in a tokenistic way. If I talk about issues of social justice or politics, I like to do it from a standpoint of having gone through some sort of personal experience, because otherwise it can seem kind of superficial, I think, and it doesn't ring true necessarily if you're just kind of tacking yourself on to whatever the latest trend is politically. But yeah, it's one of those things. I don't necessarily see myself as an inherently political writer, but it's something that I just keep returning to, and I can't really avoid it, especially with the dark times that we're facing in a whole lot of ways with the current federal government. And a certain dark side of the Australian character that's being shown. I think that now more than ever as writers we need to stand up and question it. And some people say that's unpatriotic. I think it's the most patriotic thing you can do, is if you want your country to be better, you have to question it. And that's what I'm doing through my poetry. No, I don't think people have to come from dark places to be powerful. I think oftentimes as writers you have to be willing to go to dark places to be powerful, but we're all humans, we all have common experiences, matters of the heart, matters of depression, redemption, no matter what background you're from. But I think you have to be willing to touch on the shadows to really get to something essential about human nature or about human experience. But no, I don't think you have to be from the ghetto. I mean, I'm not from the ghetto, and I think that I write powerful stuff. I've seen a lot of poverty in my life. My family in Malaysia are very impoverished, so I've definitely seen that, and I draw upon that experience. But I think it's all relative. It just everybody goes through hard times, no matter what level of society you're on. But I think there is definitely some sort of allure to people like Eminem and Tupac, who have really been to the depths of human experience. I think it's been very difficult, it's been a challenge, but that's really what it's all about. If you don't push yourself, you're not really going to get anywhere. I mean, I started rapping pretty late in life, I started rapping about 19 or 20 years old. Most rappers start, you know, when they're around 12. So that was a challenge for me to try to learn to do that. And I thought, okay, I can teach myself to rap. I can teach myself to do a different style of poetry, slam poetry. I can teach myself to write a novel. And so I'm still learning, even though I've only got about 5 weeks to go before I hand it in to my publisher. I'm still learning. But you know, I heard Philip Roth talking about being a novelist, and he said that his first 4 novels were basically him just trying to figure out what tools he had at his disposal. So, you know, I think it's definitely a long arc, and I'm going to keep learning. I don't think you ever stop learning when it comes to writing and expressing yourself creatively. There's always a plateau, and then something accelerates up a hill for a while and then it plateaus. And I hope that I've still got that inquisitiveness and that and aiming to challenge myself and push myself, you know, even when hopefully I'm in my 60s, 70s, 80s. Let's hope I make it that far, who knows. But yeah, it's been a huge challenge. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, write this novel. I'm holding myself to pretty high standards. Other people are doing the same. There's a lot of hype around it, but I just kind of have to ignore that and do myself justice by doing the best thing that I can. It sounds like a cliche, but as long as I do the best that I can, then I've really succeeded. If I was talking to my 19-year-old self, I'd say my 19-year-old self wouldn't have listened at all. I'm sure I'd have all sorts of advice, and people probably gave me great advice when I was 19, but I wasn't willing to listen. And there was something exciting about that. You know, I didn't care. I was spontaneous. I thought that what I had to say was so vitally important to the world and that I had to get out there, that I didn't have a second to lose. Now I'm trying to take a little bit more time with it, try and be a bit more calculated so that I can really sculpt and polish my words. But at the same time, there was a joy to that sort of pouring out, that outpouring of creative energy when I was 19. And I sometimes think I don't have that as much now, and that I've sort of tamed the beast a little bit more. And so in some ways that's good, in other ways not so good. So I'm not sure I could give any advice to my 19-year-old self. I'd probably tell him to take a bit more time to edit. Write in cold blood, no, write in passion and edit in cold blood. That's what I'd say, but he wouldn't listen.